Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. It's been a while since I've been online. My name is Imee Contreras. I am the one who started Awaken Global Meditation. And joining us is Janet Roos. She's one of my best friends who is based in San Francisco. She and I did the UCLA training in mindfulness facilitation training together a couple of years ago. And so I'm really excited and I'm just so intrigued about the topic that we are touching on today, which is about intergenerational trauma around racism and how we can transform that through the practice of mindfulness. So, hi Janet.
Hi, Imee. It's so
How are
good
you
to
doing?
see you.
Oh, good to see you too. I miss you.
Miss you too.
We should
Actually,
be together right
right now
now,
you should be in
actually.
San Francisco if all the changes in the world hadn't happened.
Yeah, I
You would
would
be
be
here in
right
San
there with
Francisco right
you.
now.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, how's everything going over there? Because there's a lot of news that we're receiving on this end about what's happening in the US, and it seems pretty intense. And yeah, how are you guys?
Well, it's amazing to see all the freedom fighters out there. You know, some people might call them protests. I call them freedom fighters. This is the next generation that are coming, smart, capable. They have a strategy and a plan. And, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
And you see this real heartfelt desire for no longer business as usual. The suffering that people of color and especially Black lives has enough is enough. We've had over 400 years of it, and to see this change and transformation happening, you already see it. You know, laws are coming in place, chokehold is becoming illegal, um, the tightness of police unions. You know, we have to remember the police, especially in the South, were created to catch slaves and to keep slaves in check. So it's a racist beginnings, and the foundations begins in racism. So there's
Right.
so much to unpack there.
Where did you come from exactly, Janet? Because you just mentioned the South, right? And so that they created the police. Where you're from, the South also, aren't you?
Well, no, I was born in New York. I was born at the Women's Hospital in Manhattan. My parents, we grew up in Flushing, Queens, New York. And my parents are Southerners. They are part of the Great Migration. I don't know if people know this, but in America, the greatest migration were African Americans, people of African descent, Black folks that moved from the oppressive, racist, segregated South to new opportunities in the North. And as you'll notice is that the folks coming from North Carolina or South Carolina tended to move up to the Northeast, so to New York and Boston and Connecticut and Pennsylvania and places like that. And then, you know, in the middle of other Southern states ended up in like Chicago and Ohio and places like that. And then you saw like Louisiana and now the Texas tended to move to the West. So to California, Los Angeles and San Francisco. So
Right.
that was part of what we would call the Great Migration.
And that was mainly to find better opportunities moving up north. And do you
Right.
think that
Well,
that was one of the reasons why you have become such a great, successful woman that you are? That the
yeah,
fact that
it's
your
really,
parents had made these very impactful decisions for
yeah,
their own children.
yes, my mother is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and after she went to Barbara Scotia College, the first one in her family to get her undergraduate degree. And from there, she decided to move for new opportunities in the North. So she ended up moving to New York, to Harlem. Harlem at that time was a vibrant Black community of writers and poets and educators and forward-thinking folks. And there wasn't the oppressiveness and um, the overt racism of the KKK and white supremacist nationalist organizations and the segregation of certain restaurants you couldn't eat at, and bathrooms were segregated, and there basically are domestic terrorists live in the South, and it's very dangerous in the South for Black people. And my father is from Louisiana, and he comes from the Louisiana Creole folks. And so, you know, Creole being a combination of African and French and Spanish. His My great grandfather was Jewish, and his wife was Creole. And so my dad comes from the Creole lineage of Louisiana. And my dad actually at 17 volunteered for World War II. And he wanted to be part of the famous Tuskegee Airmen, but unfortunately, well, I don't know, but they didn't lose anybody. The Tuskegee is my understanding. But his mother had to sign because he was underage. His mother had to approve of him going into the Air Force, and she would not sign the papers in fear that it would be too dangerous for him.
Right.
So,
Did they meet in New York or did they meet in the South and then both decide that it was best to start a family up north?
no, they met in New York, in Harlem. My mother was at the Women's YMCA there, and they have a social hour. So there's a social time where the men come. And my dad, being my dad, was trying to show up. She was playing ping pong with her classmate, schoolmate from college, and he was going to show her how to play ping pong. So my mom said, yeah, he was very confident in himself and very arrogant, but he definitely won her heart. And they got married, actually. I think it was less than a year after they met, and they have been soulmates. They're just really two of the most amazing people I've ever met are my parents.
Right.
They
Well,
were quite my heroes.
I can imagine he would have had to have been really confident to approach your mom, who is absolutely classy. You know, I love your mom so much. She's just such a wonderful woman, you know, very educated and kind. And yeah, she just really holds herself well, right? So, um, now I just wanted to ask, had because you did grow up in a really good family, like your parents stayed together throughout your until your dad passed away.
Yes, that's true.
And I'm sure that your mom still loves him with all her heart even to now. And so you as a Black family with the family unit that still stayed together as a whole and were given the education, did you also experience any kind of racism as you were growing up and even up to now? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes, I've experienced racism. And growing up, we lived in a neighborhood that was very diverse. And New York didn't always have neighborhoods that were diverse. You would have Italian neighborhoods and Irish neighborhoods and Black neighborhoods and Jewish neighborhoods. So there was imposed or decided upon neighborhoods that were not racially diverse. And then there are neighborhoods in New York that are racially diverse. And our neighborhood in Flushing was very racially diverse. So we had, white families and, and we had Black families, we had families, Puerto Rican families, we had mixed race family where one parent was Black and one parent was white. And so we were very, very, very diverse then. We didn't have as many Asian at that time, but we had a couple of Asian families. So it was a very diverse neighborhood. So I am a person that embraces diversity. I believe that we are so much more powerful and how we can strive in the world and be impactful in this important thing called our life when we start opening ourselves to all people with all creative ideas and all our differences. And that is where we are powerful human beings. And that is where we can become great citizens of this beautiful Mother Earth.
Right. So
in terms of schools, to your question around racism, I can give you one example. We went to public school for kindergarten, and then we went to Catholic school. So I went to Catholic grade school, I went to a Catholic prep high school, and then I went to St. John's University College. So I'm a Catholic kid. And in grade school, we did not have a lot of diversity. So my class, there might have been 2 Black kids. I think we had 1 Asian kid, and the rest were white kids. And I remember one scenario, and I was into sports as well. So I played on the softball team, the basketball team, and the track team. And I was the only Black until I got my cousin to join one of the basketball team. I was the only Black on the team. And I remember one time I had struck out the team. I had a lot of strikeouts, and all the mothers on the other team were saying, because I was a pitcher on the softball team, said to one of the nuns in our school that they didn't believe I was my age and that I must be older, and that they wanted to see my birth certificate. And my mother, being that amazing woman you mentioned earlier, she told her, she said, I will let you see Janet's birth certificate after I have seen everybody else's birth certificate on both teams.
Right.
Needless to say, I never heard that question again, and nobody has asked that of me.
I mean, that's a great lesson in equality, right? I mean, why single out one person? If that were going to be a requirement, might as well be everybody, regardless of who you are.
Exactly. So, and having a strong, smart mother like that to be able to respond so skillfully was a value.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in Minnesota. I'm based now in the Philippines, but the whole thing happening with George Floyd that started in Minneapolis, it really struck a chord with me and brought back a lot of memories about how it was for me to grow up in a predominantly upper middle class white neighborhood. And I remember the first thing on the first day of school, because it was 6th grade that I moved to the US, and the first question that was asked of me by one of my classmates was, do you have a TV in the Philippines? And I said, yes, we have TVs. And he said, oh, really? I thought you all lived in trees. And at that time,
That's
I
what they
didn't
say about
really
Africa.
understand. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what that meant. But I was like, does he think I'm a monkey? You know, like, um, but yeah, I mean, those are kind of those subtle
Mhm.
comments that might not be completely understood right away as something that's racist, but you could tell already there's an air, and there's the atmosphere is rife with it. And I wonder if it's because the history of the United States being what it is, and then also that you had mentioned before, this is not something that we are born with. It's something that we learn, and maybe it's also become part of our genetics, right? That this trauma is brought to us through the conditioning and the relationship that we have with our family members, our teachers, and maybe also because our it's so deeply ingrained. Do you think that maybe it's also a part of our system already? And so not even just us as colored or people of color or people of culture, but also people who are from the more dominant mindset. Say, for example, if we were to be more uh, specific, maybe like if you lived in a white neighborhood, maybe that there's more of that dominant way of thinking and being, also because it has already been so much a part of their lives, right? The privileges, for example, or the particular way of seeing other people as others. What do you
Right.
think?
I agree. And I think that what's interesting, and I love how Ruth King speaks of it, and I'll read this passage from her book, Mindful of Race, and how transforming racism from the inside out. And but it comes back to the whole concept of, in this world, before white people moved here, they were called Italians or Irish or Spanish or French or what have you, right? And then within that can be from Provence or Bordeaux or something like that. And but the white people, when they came here, then this whiteness started to be created, and then and then race became a divisive piece of that journey, right? So today, white people don't look at themselves as a group, the white group. A lot of times they look at themselves as individuals,
Mm-hmm.
where they look at what we would call people of color or the subordinate groups, is we take on the responsibility of the group. So if, let's say, I'm sitting at watching news or something, and there's been a murder and the person on the screen's a Black person, then traumatically, as a group connection or responsibility, I'm going to take in the remorse that, oh my God, it's horrible that this is done, but it's a Black person that did it, right?
Yeah.
But if that person that committed that crime was a white person on the screen, I asked this question: would a white person respond to that, right? So would a white person take on that responsibility as a group impact? And I would say probably not for most white people. I'm sure there's exceptions. I can't speak for all white people, clearly, or any white person there or anybody but myself. But there is studies, and even in Ruth King's book, part of the 6 hindrances she talks about is around that identification and the work that she's done with racism and that identification. Let me read this, because we're talking about intergenerational, And so this kind of talks about it very well, beautifully how she talked about it. When our racial inheritance is unknown or ignored, we contribute to racial ignorance and suffering, and through our actions, proliferate an unfinished business of our parents and ancestors in present and future generations. Racial ignorance and injury will continue until our history, hearts, and minds are transformed. What pains you to recall as you reflect on your racial identity and history? What racial traumas were passed down from your parents and ancestors, and how have they dealt with them? How have you dealt with them? It is important to acknowledge and attend to our racial programming and suffering. Shame, secrecy, and complicity will often distort and observe the hurt and harm that are right before us. Such traumas, whether known, unknown, or invisible to others, give birth to racial biases, shaping our perception, thoughts, and emotions, and influencing our actions. Old traumas, once a wound, is now a scar. Yet when brushed against, we are reminded of what must never be forgotten, the suffering that broke our hearts and woke us up. The suffering that broke our hearts and woke us up.
Right. So is what she's saying that it's important for us to be more connected to our race, that we need to be more aware of it, or could you explain a little bit more? Because the reason why I'm asking is because I have heard Black persons, like, say, for example, Denzel Washington, he says that it's not important to talk about Black and white. I have seen a video of him saying that specifically, that it's not necessarily the system that's to blame. And so now Ruth is talking about how it's, yeah, we need to come into the understanding and acceptance of our race. Is this what she's saying?
No, what she's more talking around is the intergenerational trauma. And then what she's expanding upon is, you know, a lot of times people of color, like Black folks, we will work to getting a lot of healing around that intergenerational trauma, right? And the acknowledgement of that trauma and the history of the abuse and lynchings and killings and slavery and all the things our people have been through for over 400 plus years. So we will go, I went to, you know, an event a couple of years ago, Deep Time Liberation, where it was healing from those traumas. Some unseen and some seen, some unseen and seen. Let me give you an example. It wasn't an immediate trauma for me, but it is part of my family lineage story. My mother, she was born in the 30s, had a cousin who fought in World War II. Okay. When he, after surviving World War II, one of the, you know, most deadly wars we've had, and a war that American soldiers came back celebrated, right? After victory, a lot of celebration. Well, as a Black man, he came back and they brought him back through Mississippi. In Mississippi, just because he wore a US uniform, his army uniform, the KKK grabbed him and lynched him and beat his body horribly, and burnt, and it was just horrible, my mother said. When he was coming back, his body was coming back on the train to North Carolina. My mom was just a little kid, and she just talked about how they had, signs, welcome home from the war, and, people there for celebration to welcome him home. You know how it is, balloons, you have signs, everybody's excited that you're back and you're alive from this incredible war that took so many lives. And they kept looking, and he never came out of the train. And then the porter came and told him. And so the men folk went into the train with the porter to bring his pine box body back.
Mm. Yeah, that's horrible. And he fought for that very country and he landed back in that country, and that's where he was
terrorized.
Disrespected.
He was terrorized and killed.
Yeah.
And his body was mutilated.
Right. And does that affect you now? I mean, you did mention that it wasn't a direct thing, but how does that land? And so when we're talking more about the intergenerational trauma, how has that and these stories about your family members being terrorized in that way affect you in the way that you live your life?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I noticed that I have, through our practices of mindfulness and compassion and equanimity practice, is to be with joy and sorrow. So they're not separate. So there's this sorrow for this story, and then this sorrow for my mother to have to witness that, all excited as a young kid, meeting her big cousin who just came from World War II, and to hear the stories of Europe and China or wherever countries that he was during the war. And to have this internal domestic terrorists that were supported by the institutions that we support through our taxes, like our judicial systems and our police systems and all these systems that we support. And for him to die like that, there's sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Do I carry that sorrow with me over generation that creates an energy of hate or, unresolved emotions? Or no, because, I have a practice where I can do forgiveness, and I can bring in, equanimity and compassion. Right? And so, yeah, I don't have that, but I do recognize, I was noticing when we were doing the mindfulness training at UCLA, and and I think there was a police killing. There's so many, I forget who it was right now, but there was a police killing. And I noticed, I was walking Sasha, we have a little dog, her name is Sasha, and a police car came up Teresita, our street in San Francisco. And I was completely aware of my body. So the amygdala was reactive at that time. And I was completely aware of the nervous energy in my stomach in seeing that police car. And I was completely aware of the trauma from watching all these innocent Black bodies, male and female, being murdered by those in power that we have given absolute power to, because they are being acquitted. No, they're not paying for their crimes, right? So they have the ability to murder, just like the KKK had the ability to murder Black folks.
So how then do you think that the mindfulness practice can help us transform? Because ultimately our practice is about working through and eliminating as much as we can the greed, the hatred and the ignorance in our minds and in our experience. And it's great that, you know, we show up for both the joys and the sorrows. But do you have any advice as how to use this mindfulness practice to transform it into a way that is more beneficial for us? And yeah, and taking into consideration what really the goal of our practice is, or is there a goal?
Yeah, great question, Imee. And I'm thinking right now of, and hopefully I articulate it correctly, but if I don't, I apologize, folks. But in Dante's Inferno, the darkest corners of hell are reserved for those that stay in a state of neutrality during a time of moral crisis. A state of neutrality during a time of moral crisis. Silence is violence. I've seen some of those signs in some of the freedom fighters that are fighting for equality. And so when we talk about our practice, we're quieting the mind so that we can journey into the inner being of ourselves, so that we can bring present moment awareness. So it's not like we're meditating, or at least me, I'm not meditating to try to go into neutrality and bypass and, you know, okay, I'm going to meditate it all away and all of a sudden everything's going to be back hunky-dory and my perfect life is going to start again. It's not that. It's really to bring awareness to life, or what is happening now, seeing it clearly, what is happening now, and to be able to fully be present, bringing myself fully present to what is happening now.
Right.
And
This,
go ahead.
what you just said with Dante's Inferno, what that reminds me of is what you had mentioned earlier about anti-racism. It's not enough to be not racist, right?
Yes.
So just as an example, what a non-racist would be, like someone who says, I have a lot of Black friends, or I have a lot of multicultural friends, or I don't say the N-word, and you know, that's not racist, yes, but that anti-racism that you and I had a conversation about, it's not just sitting and watching everything in a neutral space, but actually speaking up when injustice is being done, right?
Yes, exactly. And let's bring Angela Davis's exact words in, because this is from her. And this is when she was a young woman fighting, I'm not sure, this might be late 60s or early 70s, probably late 60s. I'm not sure the date on this. But what she says is, in a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. That way, like you're saying, we can't stay neutral. Silence is violence. We have to take a stand. So you have a choice. You can stand. I don't know if you saw the video. There was an image. I think this was in New Jersey. Freedom fighters or protesters, whatever you want to call, were doing a peaceful demonstration, and some guys did an imagery of George Floyd's murder in front of them with a big old Trump sign and a big old flag, and were mockery. And a couple of them have already lost their jobs, and the companies that they worked for said that this is not our value system. These are not our core values. We do not condone this horrible behavior. So there was, and I think one of the companies was FedEx. This is an example of companies not staying neutral during this time.
Right.
And people not staying neutral. If you notice, this movement is unique in that it is a global movement. You know, people are protesting all through in other countries and other continents. And the diversity. I mean, we've always had white allies in the civil rights movement. There have always been white allies, but this kind of diversity and support, I haven't seen this type of movement in the past. And it's wonderful to see, because it shows us that people are waking up. People are waking up, you know. And I feel that if we weren't in such a racist society, that more people of African descent would be thriving greater in this country. If the roadblocks were let go, if the institutional racism was let go, there would be just more and more thriving. You know, I've been in technology for 34 years. You know, I have a degree in computer science, and I've worked for companies in their tech departments, and I've had my own business. I've been a director. I've done a lot of things, but there wasn't a lot of Black Americans that I saw. There were some, yes, but not a lot. But so how do we create an equal society so we can come up? You know, COVID is impacting our communities greater because it shows you the economic divide. It shows that, you know, and technology is one of those industries that you know, there's a way of getting out of that, you know, that cycle. You know, there's opportunity and there's financial security there that can be helpful. So, you know, I know we're not talking about the economic impact of that, but I mean, it's a huge impact. You have, you know, free labor for hundreds and hundreds of years, you know, free labor. And you talk about the impact to Africa. You know, the slavers stole the youth, right? The biggest asset any country has is their young people. The young people are doing the work. The young people, the older people have done the work, right? The babies are just coming. It's the middle that are the ones that are doing the work. And, you know, the parents go off doing, you know, working, and the slavers and other tribes might help steal the children.
Right. You know what comes up for me when you say that in modern times, you know, what it could be called now is human trafficking, modern day slavery.
That's really powerful. I mean, you're right.
And I mean, who's to say that it's not still continuing, right? And there's children going missing, there's women going missing, everywhere, all the time now. And yeah, and I think, like, with regard to the timing of all that's happening right now with this pandemic, and then also with the freedom fighters really standing up over there and all over the world, and all this talk about new normal, right? Which for me, I don't necessarily connect or align with these words exactly. But like, how do we create and transform things, like create a new world that can be more equal opportunity for all, right? And maybe it is now that time, because seems like the world had stopped for those few moments for us, and now it's starting back up again, and then finding maybe through a practice, maybe through mindfulness or other practices where you can have clarity and transform your inner world also, right? How you show up in the world, how you can create the change with being more anti-racist rather than not racist and more neutral, just standing in the sidelines watching things happen, but
Right.
to be more a part of it in a really skillful way. And I think that that's what our mindfulness practice helps us to be more discerning. How do we do this in a way that's not harmful, right? I don't know, do you agree?
I agree. And I think that, people of color tend to do the work because they're the victims, they're the ones that are the highest impacted. And so what we need to see is a movement for white awakening work. And I was in a meeting earlier this week, and one of the women that does a lot of work on white awakening mentioned that they're going to have to expand because a lot more white people are interested in this training. And so that's great. Robin DiAngelo and, White Fragility in that book, and she has done. And, the thing about it is that, the dominator, which is in America, white people, right? That's the dominator. They have the most power and influence and money in America. And so in order for us to be, and for America to really change and create a more equal, true to the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, is for white people to start looking at how they as a group have harmed other people. And then in that awareness, how they can transform. Because they can't just say, well, that happened a longer time ago and I wasn't there, right? I wasn't there. Well, let's look at your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your great-grandparents, and let's go back and talk about what they did, how they came here, how they got their opportunities.
Right, like how they made their money. And I guess that's the privilege, is sometimes you are able to go to an Ivy League school because your parents and your grandparents had those opportunities, and because maybe you got just a straight open door, like you could walk right into it because of generations of your family having had been a part of these schools, or they're maybe even giving money, and I guess like those privileges that sometimes we don't think about, that our forefathers had those opportunities to make money and save money and buy land and properties, that where your wealth has accumulated over generations.
Exactly.
And if you're coming from an oppressed upbringing or background, or generations of your forefathers had been oppressed or enslaved, how you didn't have those opportunities back then, and that now you're starting from zero.
Exactly.
Right?
And then to make it even a stronger chokehold is, one, the slave could not learn how to read, right? Maybe there were small scenarios where, master taught their slave how to read, okay? But for the most part, you could be whipped and beaten and all of these things if you were caught reading. So keep them uneducated, keep them dependent. And then the sharecropper, after Civil War and slavery, the sharecropper institution came. And that just basically, you were, I don't know, subcontractor, I guess you would call it. And you have to, buy all these things from the owner of the land. And then, so now you've created a debt. Then you create your vegetation, whatever you're growing, right? And then that farmer or owner of the plantation will buy back it from you, but he's all going to subtract all the stuff that you borrow from him as your debt. And then after you take your debits and your credits, maybe you have a little bit of money left or not. You might still owe. So, it was just another way of disempowering and, keeping the slave system alive. And then
It
it's
doesn't sound that much different from a lot of people's lives right now, too, right? This
yeah,
accruing debt and paying interest and yeah,
exactly.
wow.
Exactly. Right. And then, I didn't even, it's so deep and, I'm clearly not an expert in all the details of it, but, you have Jim Crow and all of these things. But I think that, I think why it matters, and I can talk from my experience, why it matters to allow equality is that there is empowerment in having people look like you in the room, and if you're the only one, I I don't like the word tokenism because it implies that you shouldn't be there, but we needed a dark person, so we put you there because you deserve to be there, right? But it shouldn't have to, it should be a world of diversity. I go back to it that we need to, liberate the mind and decolonize the spirit and allow people to thrive and aspire and create and transform and be all that they can be. On 1% of the boys growing up are going to be able to play in the NBA. I mean, there's so much opportunity, that's why people want to come to America. So we need to stop chokeholding people through racism so that they can be the best they can be and contribute to this great earth, Mother Earth, that we all live in. Because we all have that responsibility, and we need to allow the beauty and the flowering of all beings on this earth. Because I find no gratitude or graciousness or specialness in being the only one in the room. I want to see diversity. I don't want to be the only one.
Right. And I think that your voice is really important, Janet, because you have made great headway for yourself. You're a successful woman and you are happy, joyful, and open and kind. And you have all of these qualities that many people aspire to become. And do you have any advice as to, for those who would like to take the opportunities that open up to them? What would you advise people who are feeling like maybe, they're not going to make, that they don't have enough opportunities, but if something opens up, or maybe how do you teach people to find opportunities regardless of the current situation?
Well, the first thing I would say is take the time to quiet the mind and drop into the heart and really think about what you really want to do, what lights you up, what excites you, what moves your spirit. And then once you make that, once you decide what lights you up, and it's something attainable, you know, if you're playing Division III basketball, maybe inspiring to play in the NBA might not be realistic, but really look at what lights you up and what is possible, right? And then look at, okay, then what does it take to do what you like? Let's say someone wants to move and be in technology, or wants to be a coder in technology. I want to do some build some gaming, do gaming in technology. Okay, so there's a skill there, right? You have to learn how to code in the programming languages. So then what I would do is I would get the education. So I would go back and go back to school and get the training and preparedness in that. And then while you're in school, then I would start interning with see whether you can intern for free with some gaming organizations, right? Because a lot of times, companies, they love free. And so here's an opportunity for you to get experience. Like when I was in college, I was a ball girl for the New York Mets. That's our baseball team in New York. And it was the best job ever. I loved that job. We had so much fun being in the sidelines, hanging out with the players. Me, they were like, season ticket holders. So one guy owned the deli and he was always bringing us sandwiches. And it was a great time. I loved that job. One of my favorite jobs. But one of the things I realized the second year is they wanted, because I did it for 2 years, that I really should get an internship in computer somewhere so I can get some experience. So what happened was the head of IT for the Mets hired me as an intern so I could get some real world experience working. And so I did that. I interned, and you just work for free and you learn the system. My first job out of college was an IBM, System 36, which is the system that I worked on at Shea for the Mets. I didn't learn the System 36 in college. They had mainframes at that time. I'm aging myself. But that's a way of one getting experience while you're learning, right? It's also a way of getting to know people, so networking. And then it's also a way of allowing yourself exploration, because maybe you're thinking, now that I'm seeing the culture or how this all works, maybe I'm not so interested in this, and maybe I want to do something else. But it gives you an opportunity to see all these things. And so I would recommend that for successfully allowing yourself to evolve, especially young people, is to be open to exploration and not be afraid to fail. Because failure is not failure. It's just an opportunity to do it a different way. Right? So, and there is no such thing as perfect. You can strive for excellence, but there's no such thing as perfect. So you get out of your own way, and we all have butterflies. We're all going to have fear, but be aware. The mindfulness practices allows you to be aware of that fear and how it is in your body. So you bring yourself to your body, because a lot of time we spend a lot of time outside of our body. So we bring ourselves to our body and recognize, what is that? Is there tingling? Is there tension? What are you feeling in your body? And just recognize it, that being aware, but don't let it stop you. We can easily talk ourselves out of anything before we even try.
Thank you for that. So, would you please guide us into a mindfulness practice? It would be so lovely.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think I can even get us a
I
little.
just, I really
How much
enjoyed
time?
the conversation that we had because not only did we talk about the intergenerational trauma from historical past, right? And owning that, but yet also not getting too caught up in it now in the present moment that it stops us from transforming our lives for a better future. Thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, that was beautiful said, Imee. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Janet. Okay,
Love you
so
so.
yeah. Oh.
So let's keep that theme going in our practice of right now. We'll just keep the mind spacious.
Okay,
How much
great.
time?
Oh yeah, just go ahead and lead us into what feels right for you.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
So I invite you to sit in a comfortable chair, cushion, and just at ease with your body, letting your body rest and your breath natural. I invite you to close your eyes, or if that's not comfortable, just bring your eyes downward so you're not just looking at anything, just a glaze downward if that feels better for you. And then grounding in this moment, just take several full breaths. And just breathing in, filling the lungs. Just pausing. And then just slowly letting go of the breath. Softening the belly. Allowing yourself to be still. Your breath might be sensing in the in and out sensation of the nostrils, or the rising and falling of the abdomen or chest. Just bring awareness to where the breath is in the body. Now, as you shift your awareness away from the breath, you just bring your attention, if sound, just listening to sound. Maybe it's the bell or sound around you, maybe a car. Just bring your awareness to that sound without going into a story. Notice how sounds arise and vanish. And as we've all been through so much and so much trauma through the COVID-19 and now the senseless murder of another Black body, it might have caused trauma in your body. So just sense your body, sense where you might feel tension or achiness or stress. Just breathe into that tension. If your mind starts to wander, it's okay. Just notice, maybe labeling, thinking, and then bring your attention back to your breath, back to your anchor. And start noticing your body from the inside out. Spacious awareness. Bring awareness that the body is not solid. Sensations of the breath and the body float and changes like the open sky. That you're not attached to any tension or tingling, that it changes. Notice how the breath breathes itself. It moves like a breeze. The breath moves as it will. Sensations float and change. Just allow all thoughts and images, feelings and sounds to just come and go, floating in the clear, open space of awareness. What is it like to pay attention to one breath at a time? Pay attention to the breath in this moment would full awareness of that breath. Notice the sensation in the body as you inhale and exhale. The in and out sensation from the nostrils. The rising and falling of the abdomen. If your mind starts to wander, it's okay. You can always start again. There's no need to judge. Just bring yourself back to your awareness of the breath. Notice the ground beneath your feet. Bring your long, tall body and deep roots and your present awareness to your life. Trust you and your gifts and talents. No other being has the same gift and talents as you do. May all beings live with ease, and be mindful. May all beings be happy and peaceful. May all beings be healthy and strong. May all beings be held in love. May all beings be safe from harm. You, the richest person in the world, have been laboring and struggling endlessly, not understanding that you already possess all that you seek. The Lotus Sutra.
Mm. Oh, thank you so much for the practice, Janet. I feel really good and relaxed right now. It was hard to open my eyes, and I feel really spacious. Um, I really needed that. And also, I love the conversation that we had, and I really would love for us to continue having these conversations. I felt that it was really addressing what's going on in these current times with that very hopeful, motivating feel to it as well, because it's we don't get just caught in what's happening, the stickiness of it, but yet also looking to see the light through our practice, and also how do we improve ourselves and our lives as well, even in the midst of all of this confusion. So I love that part of the transformational teachings that you bring into this. So thank you for the time that you're giving us, and to help us understand what we can do, as the human race, to make this planet better, and for us to really build relationships with each other in a way that is equal, and see each other with respect and love, and and provide opportunities for one another in the best ways. It's beautiful. So
Yeah, I mean, it's always so wonderful to spend time with you. I always feel uplifted and a fullness in my time together with you. It's beautiful what you're doing and the teachings that you're offering. And we need teachers like you. And so I feel very honored to be with you and to spend this time together. And I also feel I agree with you. We can do this. It just takes intention and effort. But I believe in this world, and I believe that people can transform, and I believe that we can trust each other, that we're not boogeymans. And
yeah,
it takes changing the narrative and how we stereotype and perceive each other, you know. And um, there's good people and challenged people in all races, right? There's good and bad everywhere. And so, you know, how do we the people that want to stay woke and want to transform this world, we can make it happen.
And
Not
let's hold ourselves accountable, right? We're responsible for our own awakening, I think, at the end of the day. And this is what the mindfulness practice really offers to us, is to be more aware and see our patterns so that we can really make the changes that we need to make our lives better and lives of others. And so it's true though, also Janet, we need more teachers like you. And so I would love to do this more often with you. And I'm really excited to tell everybody that we will be doing this more frequently. Janet will be teaching mindfulness and also offering other ways to live and transform our lives for the better. So,
yeah,
yes.
maybe we can do something on, the economics, and, people probably are stressed around money right now. And
Yeah, I need that for sure.
yes, it's stressful times in that way as well, right? So we have
Yeah.
social challenges, financial challenges. We have lots of challenges right now. So how can we be with it all and still have our equanimity, our balance, our centeredness through it all?
Perfect. Okay, Janet, I love you with all my heart. I can't wait again for the next one. Okay, everybody, tune in for more.
Thank
And
you,
please keep
everyone.
practicing. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Janet.
Thanks, Imee.